My name is Dolores Cannon. I guess my official title for this conference is I'm the director of it. I inherited it last year, although I have been involved with the UFO conference since its inception 27 years ago. I've always been involved with it, but the man who was putting it on that I worked with died a few years ago, and they were going to let the conference die. And I said, no, nobody wanted to run it. It's a big job. And so they said, it will die unless I took it over. And I've got a lot going on in my life. I didn't need anything extra, but I couldn't let, it was Lou Farish was the one who began it. I couldn't let Lou's dream die. So I said, no, I'll take it over. So this is my second year of running it. No, my work in the metaphysical field goes back 45 years. I began doing, I'm a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, and I specialize in past life regression and healing. And this is what I teach now all over the world because I developed my own technique that is different than any other hypnosis technique in the world. But when I began in the 1960s, nobody was doing any of this. So it's why they say I'm a pioneer, because I began before anyone was involved in reincarnation, past lives. There was no metaphysics, there was no New Age, there was nothing when I began. I was doing hypnosis, but it was the simple kind, just for habits. Stop smoking, lose weight. That's all hypnosis was used for in those days. And that's when I began, when nobody was doing anything. So it's been an uphill battle for 45 years because people didn't know about this, they didn't believe in it. And I perfected my own technique, because there was nobody to teach me how to do the past life, into past life regression. And over the 45 years, I found a way to heal people instantly by using hypnosis and their own minds. And this is what I'm teaching now all over the world. But it was 28 years ago that I got involved in the UFO field. But by that time, I'd already had 5 books written, and it was an uphill battle to get my books published because they all said, what are you talking about, past lives? We don't know anything about those things. And so I've always been having to wait for the rest of the world to catch up with me. Now it's being accepted as normal, but not back when I began. Now they're all thinking, well, yeah, we understand it, but not when I started out. But it was back in the 80s is when Lou Farish was a good friend of mine, and he was very much involved with UFOs. And I was always interested in UFOs, but I was not involved with them. And he called me, he wanted me to come to a meeting they were having of MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network. And he wanted me to meet the other investigators. And I thought, well, it'll be interesting. And began to find out about their work. And then they asked me if I wanted to come in and do hypnosis with suspected abductees. And those were the days when the abductees were just beginning to find out about. Nobody knew about those either. Everybody was hiding all these things. And everything was frowned upon. And Lou asked me if I wanted to come and talk to these people. And he said, you've been involved in the bazaar for so long, we don't think you'll be frightened. I said, no, I wasn't frightened, I was just extremely curious. But my technique takes people into other lives. So I would have to develop the technique to keep them in this life to explore their experiences on UFOs. So the first session I ever had was with a MUFON meeting of the state directors and the investigators, 25 of them, and they wanted me to put this young woman into trance in front of all of them so they could all ask questions. Not the ideal situation, but it worked beautifully. They didn't know it was the first time I'd ever done a UFO case. And after that, Lou and Jerry Blackburn would take me to different cases they'd heard of, and they were always there when we were doing the investigations. And we began to find out a lot of fascinating, interesting things. And that was about the time that Lou decided to start the UFO conference, back in the 80s. So I've been involved with the whole beginning, even though nobody in those days, well, if we had 50 people, let's put 50 people in one room at this same conference. That's how we began. And there's nobody knew anything about this stuff, and it was just a curiosity. That's about the time that Whitley Strieber was one of the first to come out with his book, Communion. And but that's when I got involved with doing the investigation. So I've been doing it about 28 years, and I've written 4 books on my cases. The main one that I've written is called The Custodians. That's my whole history of what I found out doing the UFO investigations. And I believe now I have found the answer to any question that anybody would want to ask about UFOs. And I have never in all of that time ever found a negative case, because I work differently than the other investigators do. They keep the person in the light levels of trance, where the emotions, the conscious mind is very active, and there's a lot of fear. I don't. In my technique, that's what makes it so different. I work in the deepest possible level of trance. When you go into that level, the conscious mind is totally out of the picture, and they cannot interfere. And you get the conscious mind out of the picture and you go into the deep subconscious, you get the real story of what happened. And it's not at all what they think happened, and it's not at all what they remember. So that's why my cases and my books are different, because we probe deeper and we get to the real information. That's why I've never found a negative case, because I've always found the reasons why these things are happening. Once you find out the reasons, there isn't any fear, because it all makes perfect sense. I don't believe the key to the answers with the UFO phenomena is spirituality. That's limiting it too much. It is definitely not religion, because it defies religion. It goes way beyond religion. But spirituality is limiting it also. It has to do with the person, their beliefs, and the psychic phenomena is beginning to come back. Everyone has psychic abilities, and these are beginning to increase. They're beginning to return. I think it has more to do with that part than it does spirituality. But my work in hypnosis and I've written 17 books, we still don't call it spirituality. Even though we have found the source of God, we know where God comes from, I know where the ETs come from, I know their assignments they've had on Earth since the beginning of time, but it still doesn't go back to spirituality. Maybe I'm cutting corners, but that's not what I found. This is something that people are always saying, when are we going to have open contact? When are they going to land on the White House lawn and announce they are here? When are we going to have that happen? It won't happen, because it's not allowed to happen. This is what people don't understand. The main rule that the ETs go by is the law of non-interference. Once a civilization has been started and established, you cannot interfere in the development of that civilization. They have to stumble through their whole thing and make their own mistakes. They cannot interfere, because you interfere, then that changes the course of history. They have to find the answers for themselves. That's why my book, The 3 Waves of Volunteers, shows how they have been having people come in to help with the energy. But if they were to land, you see, that would change the whole course of history. It's not allowed to happen. You've watched enough Star Trek movies to notice they can't. That's where that all comes from. Because you gotta remember, Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek was not fiction. It's real. That's the main law, was non-interference. They have already had meetings with the government and over many years, and they've helped them with the development of projects. Of course, the government didn't appreciate it, so they stopped working with the governments. This is all in my books. They explain these things. But they will never be open communication, not now, because we're not ready for it yet. We have to find our own answers. And stumble around through it until we work it out ourselves. The only way they can possibly interfere is if we get to the point that we're going to blow up the world. Then they would have to stop us. Because if we destroyed the world, it would send reverberations throughout the galaxy. Now, this has happened at least 3 times in history that they have stopped governments and civilizations from proceeding because they were getting to that point. Atlantis was the last one. There was 3 more before that. But it had to be stopped because they were going too far. They were misusing power, and the greed and the power of the people is what does it. So they have to start all over again by destroying the civilization. They don't want to do it this time because it takes too long to rebuild a civilization. You have to start from nothing. Each time one was destroyed, they left enough people to begin again. But this time they said, it can't do that, it's taking too long. But they can't interfere, we have to do it ourselves. Which is hard. It'd be easier, yeah, I'd let you fix it. But we're the ones who created the mess, so we have to fix it. They don't trust us. They're actually afraid of us. We're so violent. If you think you're afraid of them, they're afraid of us. Remember, we developed from animals, and so we have that animal nature. And we're going to have to get over that violence and get away from that before they can ever trust us with anything. So they can't just step in and say, well, we're going to fix your problem. That we wouldn't learn anything from that. Children don't learn anything from that either, or adults. If you just all of a sudden, well, I'll fix it for you. Okay, then somebody's going to come along next time and fix it the next time it gets broke. You have to learn yourself. And their wisdom is, it is fantastic. So they know us better than we know ourselves. They created us after all. Well, I've been working in the UFO field for so long that I feel I understand the ETs better than most people. And I know their motives, I know why they're here, I know what they're doing, and to me they're wonderful, gentle people. That's why I've never found any that have been negative. I've found many different types of beings, but they've told me they are forbidden to harm a human being. There are councils over the laws and regulations, and they're not allowed to. And once you understand the reasons they're coming, there's nothing to be frightened about at all. But the movies and the TV like to create that fear. And fear is the strongest emotion that a human has. If they're afraid of something, they don't understand it, they're afraid of it. And that's why they think it has to be something bad, because they don't understand it. Once you understand it, anything becomes clear, and there's nothing to be afraid of. But I guess a message I could leave with people is that they've been coming since the beginning of the world, since the creation of the world. If they wanted to harm us, they sure could have done it a long time ago. They've told me, we can't do anything as bad to you as you do to yourself. So they're really not here to harm us, they're watching us, they're studying us, trying to figure out how in the world could we have gotten in this big mess that we're in. But they have the law of non-interference, so they can't interfere. All they can do is watch and studying us. We're called the grand experiment. But to me, it's a beautiful thing when you understand it. And that's why I've written so many books about it. And I feel very comfortable with them and the whole subject and everything that's going on with it. And if you hear people talking about being a fear, horror, and evil and all of that, they don't have the real story. As I said earlier, other investigators work in the lighter levels of trance. In that level, you're going to have fear because the conscious mind is very emotional and the emotions are right there. You remove that, you'll find out what's really going on. And they're here to help us. And they want us to be better. They want us to have a good world, a better world. That's their goal. So I guess that would be a good message to leave with people. Don't believe what Hollywood says in the movies and the TV. They're not like that at all.